Hey, thanks for watching. I ran my RSX for almost 6 years on Raceland Coilovers. I liked the way it looked and I enjoyed the way it handled. But after spending a lot of time and effort trying to get rid of the pops and clunks that happened every time I backed out of the garage or pulled into a parking place, I decided it was time to move on to something different. I knew I wanted a fully threaded coilover to decouple preload and ride height. And as it turns out, I'm pretty gun shy about coilovers that use stock upper mounts. BC Racing appears to be pretty popular in the RSX community, and their VR type coilovers seem to match up with my requirements pretty well. Even though the VR type coilovers cost more than twice as much as the Raceland Classics, I decided that if I can get rid of the pops and clunks, it'd be well worth the money. I don't have a great track record for trouble-free coilover installations, but hey, it's about the journey, right? So let's jump into this one and see what happens. Started on the driver's side, did that last night, got the height adjustment where I want it, so the passenger side will go a little bit more quickly. Early indications are that the shape of the coilover is better for the tie rods than the Raceland ones. For the last little while I've been running these where I put the tie rod ends on the tie rod and I rotate it 5 times on both sides, and then I feel like the wheels still look a little toed out. I haven't had it aligned since I've been doing that, but they look a little toed out to me. In order to toe them in a little bit, I have to reduce that thread. It starts to make me feel a little nervous about it. I left the tie rod ends that way when I put the BC coilover in on the other side. Honestly, it looked like the wheel was towed in a little bit, which means I could add threads to it. So that seems like a good thing. Raceland coilover, BC Racing coilover. Okay, so we're moving from a partially threaded coilover to a fully threaded coilover. Only adjustment on here is the tension on the spring, so that obviously affects the preload on the spring as well as the ride height of the car. Here you don't use the spring to adjust the ride height, you use the position of its collar on the fully threaded shock body. So here I'll show you, loosen this up a little. You loosen that bottom collar, and then as you turn this, it threads itself up onto the shock further, and which should close the gap. The other adjustment is up here. That's the damper adjustment. I did also want to talk about the top mount. Let me show you the Raceland top mount first. Okay, this is not a Raceland top mount. This is actually a Moog top mount. But it's a stock top mount, it's aftermarket version of the stock top mount. And this top hat that's in here is provided by Raceland to match up with the spring. And that gray piece under there is actually a bearing ring that's part of the top mount. So there's actually 2 different stock top mounts for the RSX. Between the 2 types of top mounts and all the aftermarket options and the fact that you add all this stuff to the assembly, there's a lot of variables involved that could contribute to things not working the way you expect them to. This, on the other hand, when this comes out of the box, it's all one assembly. I don't have to make any decisions. I just take out what I had and I put in what I have now. I don't have to worry about the preload even, right? They set the preload at the factory and they recommend that you leave it there. Really the only adjustment that I'm going to make is to the ride height, the damper, and possibly the camber. I mean, that's a lot more adjustments than I can make on the other one, but just putting this thing together is a lot simpler. All right, let's go put this baby in the car. So see that gap between the boot and the coilover mount for the tie rod in there? Never had that before. I saw that a little bit on the other side, and I thought it meant that maybe I didn't have enough grease in that boot, but this is a factory greased boot, so I don't think that's the issue. Let's loosen this out. What I want to do is I want to screw the whole shock down into the sleeve. So that means I want to turn the upper spring seat, which is locked by this lock collar, from right to left, because that will screw it down into that. So here we go. Now watch how smooth and easy this is. That just feels nice. Now you can see this gap is getting a little smaller. Okay, don't go too far. Let's measure again. Alright, so I got the rear coilover out. And so this is the Raceland coilover, and of course the BC Racing coilover. Yeah, like the fronts, the Raceland coilovers use the stock upper mounts, and you have to take these off the old struts and put them on here and compress the spring yourself and everything. With BCs, they come all one assembly, and you don't have to do anything. You just put it in the car. The preload is set on the spring, and you adjust the ride height by threading the shock in and out of this mount down here. So it appears I made my first mistake. I tried to adjust this gap here to match the driver's side before installing, but if you look here, let's see, where is it? Right there. I can't get that hole line up because of the length of the coilover, and I can't compress the spring by hand. So I think I've got to collapse that ride height a little bit. Put it back to where it was to get it installed, and then I can adjust the ride height. So another thing about the install, this bolt back here is kind of inconvenient to reach, and I moved that plate right there to make it easier to get to. You can see this one over here. I've already put the plate back. If you try to take a wrench and get it back there on that bolt, you know, it's not super easy to do. In particular, when you try to do it with a torque wrench, you know, try to get it in there and then be able to swing the wrench enough that you can make the wrench operate properly is really tough. So there's a bolt right here, and there's one there, and there's two here, and there's one down on the bottom, and I just don't take that one off the bottom completely, so that it's still attached, but I can swing that plate around, and that way I don't have to get my fingers in there to get that bolt started again. But that's not too bad. Take that off, make it a little easier to operate the torque wrench. I'll make sure I can get that tightened to spec. Alright, moment of truth. BC coils are in. Got dampers set all the way around, 15 clicks from softest, which is right in the middle. And I also feel like I got a little more camber on the driver's side left, the driver's side front, than I have on the passenger side front. So still some adjustments to be had, but I just backed out of the garage without any sounds at all. Oh my goodness. Could it really be? Definitely feel it tugging on me a little bit. Definitely needs to be aligned. A little bit of a poop show going on here at the grocery store. Okay, here we go. Pull down a lane. Go find me a parking place. And listen for the clunks. No clunks. Haven't even been thinking too much about how hard or soft the ride is. I think it feels a lot softer than what I was having with the Racelands. So that seems nice. Maybe my wife will ride in the car again without her sports bra. I'm doing 55 right now and she feels pretty good. That last line, you know, as a left turn, I gave pretty hard gas. Didn't want to let me straighten out, so I don't know if that's just the softness or if it's the alignment. I think it's probably the softness. I've gotten used to being stiffer and not having that kind of behavior. The other thing I thought might be involved is the tie rod ends. I definitely feel like the tie rod ends are fit in there a little funny. So I might do a little research on that. Or maybe, you know, maybe I'll first just try cranking up the stiffness. But overall, I think we're doing pretty damn good. So I adjusted the dampers 3 ticks to the hard direction on all 4. The car does feel stiffer now. I've noticed that already. I'm not sure it had any effect on the there's some tunes for you. I'm not sure it had any effect on the oversteer. Good morning. Just kind of anxious to try out something. I'm gonna get started on some of the follow-up things that I needed to do after installing these BC Racing coilovers. Number 1, I decided I wanted to replace this upper pinch pin with the 16 instead of the 14 that's in there, mostly because the coilovers have a camber adjustment on them. This has always been a little bit of a cumbersome thing for me to try to make sure the camber is the same on either side. So that's one thing that I'm planning to do. The other thing is the tie rod ends. I read quite a few posts of people who are installing their BC Racing coilovers and found that the tie rod ends didn't quite fit. Evidently, the BC Racing coilovers are designed to fit the EP3 tie rod ends, which are apparently essentially the same as the RSX tie rod ends, except that the pin is a little bit smaller, and this pin doesn't fit in there quite right because it's a little too big. Hopefully that research was right, and I can put the EP3 tie rod in there and alleviate that problem. Here I have a Moog version of the EP3 tie rod in, and I've double checked that, and it does indeed have a smaller stud. Okay, significantly smaller. And if I put it in here, squish it down, there won't be any separation between that boot and coilover. So that seemed good. I installed one of these on the other side, and I couldn't convince myself that I got it torqued down to the 40 foot-pounds of torque that it's supposed to be, because when I would get the nut to a certain point, that stud would start spinning. So I'm going to try to install it on this side again because I want to see how the car drives with it, even though this might not be my long-term tie rod ends if I can figure out a better option. But at any rate, I'm going to put it on and tighten it down as best I can, and I'll show you what I'm doing. So this used to be a hex key. Okay, you can see it's done something that it wasn't supposed to do. So then I take another castle nut, okay, and I screw it up right about to the base of that hole so that the little turrets surround that hole. And then put that Allen key through that hole. Okay, you see that? Kind of hard to see. Get the light on it good. Okay. Hold that in place. And then I'll turn this and you'll see that Allen wrench keeps it turning so that I can tighten it up. And then I put a little welly in it and the Allen wrench holds up. I tried using screws and different things that would fit in that hole, and obviously the Allen key gets all bent up, but it holds up to the pressure and allows me to tighten that down as tight as I can do it. I don't know how to do that and do it with the torque wrench, so I don't honestly know if I've got that to the 40 foot-pounds that it needs to be, but I pulled on it pretty hard. All right, time for the test drive. Honestly, I'm not totally confident in these tie rod ends. Well, I gotta say, I do not miss all the popping and clunking. So that's nice at least. It still feels funky. See, it just wants to keep going, whichever direction I turn. It's just not quite right. I'm back to looking at my RSX tie rod ends. I got to thinking, well, maybe my tie rod ends are bad, and the ones I had in were this one and this one. And as I was inspecting them, I started to notice that they don't look the same. This one is square with the rounded corners, but this one, if I hold it the same way, it's actually much more rounded on the top. This one is much more rounded on the top than this one is. There's a different texture to it as well. If you look at the end of the stud, this one has a little divot in it. This one is flat. They seem to be about the same size, but the markings on here are definitely different. So I started to question as to whether or not this and this are actually OEM at all. I'm pretty sure these two are the ones that came off the car originally. I can't remember where I got these two. I wouldn't be surprised if I got them off of eBay from somebody who said that they were OEM when in fact they weren't. So anyway, I think maybe the next step is to get these two back in the car. But of course this guy doesn't have a boot on him, so I need to put a new boot on him. I have a new boot here, and I have my grease. Anyway, so I'm going to try to replace this boot as well. So now I've got this one, and I've got this one, which I'm confident are actually my two OEMs. I've had this one on the car before, and this boot looks great. And this was one that the boot was torn, so I got a new boot, and we just fixed that one. So I'm going to put those on the car, and we're going to see how they do for us. That's the OEM packed boot, and it looks beautiful. There's a little bit of a gap on this side. See it right there, but it folds out real nice. That's torqued down, and I just have to put the pin in this side, and then I'll be able to put the wheels on, and we'll take it for a drive. Getting on the freeway reminded me of just how bad the tires were. Definitely had a lot of vibration. I rotated the tires, the back tires,
Had more tread, but they look like hell because of the camber I got back there from dropping it. Now those are on the front, so I've got tread on the outside, no tread on the inside, and then on the back they're bald. But before I got on the freeway, it still felt like the car was pulling a little bit, one way or the other. Maybe that's just the alignment. Maybe it's because I got used to it being a little stiffer, and I've been keeping it sort of in the middle, so it's a little softer maybe than it was with the Racelands. So anyway, I just stiffened it up a little bit more. I went 3 hard again, and now I'm gonna drive home, and I'm not gonna get on the freeway this time because that was kind of a mess. But I'm gonna drive home, and we're gonna see if the steering feels a little more normal to me with it being a little stiffer. I mean, it doesn't feel horrible, but it doesn't feel quite right. Well, I think maybe we're okay. Yeah, I think increasing the stiffness did make the steering a little more comfortable for me, but I also think that it might have a lot to do with the tires and the alignment. So I'm not going to panic about it. I think if I get new tires and get the alignment done, I think it's going to be all right. Okay, so I decided the tie rod ends were not the problem. I decided they fit just fine, just differently. I don't think I'm getting excess play in there, and so even though that's what the issue with steering feels like, I think the issue is coming from somewhere else. What I was experiencing was that it doesn't want to return to center without a little assistance. You'll turn, it seems to be a little over eager to turn sharper, and then when you would normally just kind of like let the wheel come back to center, you kind of have to move it back to center yourself. So I used that to do some research on the internet and found that can be caused if your caster is off. Well, these cars, you can't really adjust the caster, but changing the camber significantly on the front wheels will indeed change the caster. And I had noticed when I put these new coilovers on that I was getting a significant amount of camber on the front. Passenger side of the car, I've got my carpenter square here. Get it around the center of the car, get it sitting flush on the floor. You can see where it's touching the tire down there. And then if I come up to here, you can see that there's a significant gap right here, like my whole finger will go between the wheel, even more than my finger will go between the wheel and the square. So you can tell that the bottom of the wheel is sticking out, and the top of the wheel is tilted towards the inside of the car. Camber, right? Okay, so now let's go look at the other side. Here we are on the driver's side where I've used the coilovers to adjust the camber. Again, same thing down here on the ground, just touching the wheel. And then up here, pretty much no clearance. So now I feel like I've eliminated the camber on this side. So now I think we need to talk about how I did that. So here's the camber plate on the passenger side, and this is out of the box. I did not change anything on this side. So this is running perpendicular to the long axis of the car. In order to adjust the camber according to the instructions, you have to have the car off the ground so that you can get some play in it, but you loosen those bolts and then you should be able to slide the top of the strut either that way or back towards the outside of the car. And by doing that, you adjust the camber. Well, the way this is set up out of the box, you can't actually adjust anything because these bolts are right at the end of those channels, so it's not going to slide either direction. In addition, if you look close, there's little lock washers under there, and those lock washers are actually sandwiched between the strut tower and the camber plate. And then one more thing to look at here, see if I can get the lightness right. See, in between on that channel there's another hole. Okay, so now let's go look at the driver's side. Okay, so here we are on the driver's side, and you can see what I did was I moved 2 of the bolts into the center hole. They were the bolts that were on the outside of the camber plate, and I moved them to the center hole.
Before I could do that, I actually had to loosen those studs that hold the coilover to the strut tower to release those log washers out from under the strut tower. And then I was able to loosen the camber adjustment bolts. And then I was able to, with some amount of convincing, slide the top of the strut as far as I could this way. Now, you can see that it looks like it should actually go a little further. Yeah, there you go. See, it looks like it should be able to slide that a little further. But really, that's as far as I could go, because those camber adjustment bolts actually start hitting the strut tower again. In fact, the one on the left in this video is touching the strut tower. The one on the right is almost touching it. So I get a little bit of twist to the strut as I move it out, which I think is how you end up futzing with the camber. But at any rate, I moved it out as far as I could, and I tightened those back down, and then that's how I ended up now with the driver's side having almost no camber. So it was definitely was not as simple as just loosening those bolts and moving it. Definitely required some finagling. I ended up loosening everything, getting the camber adjusted, and then snugging everything back down. Anyway, this is kind of uncharted territory for me. So I have a friend who's done this before, not on a RSX, but on one of his Mustangs. He's gonna come over and take a look, and we're gonna do the other side together, assuming that he thinks what I've done was the right thing to do. Hopefully be able to take a test drive this morning and feel the steering get back to where it should be. Well, my friend gave the camber adjustment his seal of approval, so we made the same adjustments on the passenger side, and I'll be damned if it didn't fix it. We took the car for a drive, and the steering was beautiful. Well, at least as beautiful as you would expect it to be when the alignment was done by eyeballing it. You make a turn, and as you come out of the turn, the wheel goes back to center, just like you would expect. So I still have a list of things to do to wrap things up regarding the BC Racing coilovers, but right now, I couldn't be happier. Thanks again for watching.